AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Marquita Johnson, is back with us today to talk about betrayal trauma, healing your brain and body. Marquita is a licensed professional counselor, nationally certified counselor, board certified telemental health counselor, certified professional counselor, supervisor, and speaker. Her specialties include women's issues, dating, divorce, spirituality, and step families. Welcome back to AVAIYA, Marquita.
So glad to be here. Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, always good to see you. And I'm looking forward to our topic today. It's such an important one. And I think one that doesn't get talked about enough as it relates to trauma. So what is betrayal trauma specifically?
So betrayal trauma was actually coined around the early 90s, and it has a lot to do with some rupture in attachment and also trust. And so this can be from various relationships, including parent or familial relationships, family relationships, and also, of course, romantic partner relationships. So it can span, often starting sometimes in childhood and going unresolved and then moving to romantic partners. So it's very important to be able to identify this violation of trust and then this violation of attachment. And it can manifest as abandonment. It could be something that is emotional kind of betrayal. It could also be a physical type of betrayal also.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I didn't realize when the term originated. That's interesting. Yeah, going all back to the 90s.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so right, we can have this experience of betrayal trauma, and I'm glad you mentioned it can be right something we experience with a partner. I think a lot of people think of it in that way when we think betrayal, like an infidelity or something, but also all the betrayals that can happen between parents and children or family members, friends, what have you. So how does betrayal trauma impact someone's brain as well as their body?
So, of course, there's been a lot of research and the big push between this mind and body kind of concept. I would say in the last 10 years, definitely, we've seen a push in the last 5 years. And it can include things like brain fog. Our central nervous system can respond to this betrayal to where we get in this hyper vigilant state to where we're in this fight or flight, freeze or fawn mode, which is usually very representative of experiencing trauma. And so, of course, our brain and our bodies are often connecting and speaking to one another. And depending on your philosophy or school of thought, you can see it as being all integrated or see it as kind of working together. And with that, there can manifest some anxiety, of course, because there's this fear of the unknown of what will happen after this betrayal. How will it impact the dynamics of our family system? How will it impact the dynamics of our relationship? If it's one of a couple, it can impact the finances if they have children together, if they have joint businesses or ventures together. So it can have a long lasting kind of domino effect. And when we think about also the long-lasting trauma that the individual is impacted by. So they can experience some self-esteem issues, some self-worth issues, some intrusive thoughts, insomnia, problems sleeping, problems focusing, concentrating, ruminating thoughts, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, because they're trying to maintain some sense of control in their world. And so the betrayal can have long lasting impacts.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned the OCD. That makes a lot of sense because yes, OCD being right, a very controlling kind of behavior and set of behaviors, that would make sense why one might have that as a coping mechanism, right, from something like betrayal where they lost that trust and control.
Right. Yeah, that sense of safety.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been compromised.
Yeah. I've never thought about that being linked together, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. And so, okay, how can people heal from this betrayal trauma? And if so, how could they go about that?
Yeah, so I like to use the acronym. So if you all have watched me a few times, because it makes it easier to remember. And so I'm going to provide the 3 R's. One is to recognize it. We need to acknowledge the experience and what happened. And sometimes in betrayal, others can minimize it. And this can be the person that has caused the betrayal. They may minimize it to say, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't understand. You're overreacting. But for that person to really acknowledge what happened, that can be a powerful part of the healing process, because they're saying this impacted me in this manner, in this way, and I'm still struggling to heal from it. And so we can't heal from what we don't reveal. And so it's really important to one, acknowledge it. And so that's the recognize it. And the second R would be resource it. A lot of what I will suggest is getting into our bodies, because the betrayal has a way of being trapped into our bodies till we get this hypervigilance or this anxiety or these gut kind of stomach issues to where we're carrying a lot of that stress or anxiety in our stomachs or in our chest, but it's trapped in our bodies to where our bodies are responding to this. And it's important to be able to resource that. So deal with and heal within your body. In some ways, one can do that is by engaging in activities that will help resource our body, like exercising. Yoga can help resource your body. What we eat, like what we put into our bodies, can also be a way of resourcing our bodies. And then the last R would be restoration. So in order to restore ourselves and engage in that continuous healing process, that may involve counseling, that may involve coaching, that may involve some spiritual practice. If you're into holistic care, it may involve a lot of different retreats or time even spent by oneself, kind of restoring oneself, because again, the betrayal can be long lasting and impact how that person sees themselves as far as their identity, their self-worth. And so those are like deeper core issues that the individual continuously has to work through. And then if it's a couple or family, it may be beneficial to engage in family counseling or engage in individual therapy and couples therapy.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate the three R's. It is nice to break it down into that. And I love what you said when you talked about the recognizing, right? We can't heal from what we don't reveal. I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it. Yes. Obviously, if we don't understand and recognize that how we've been hurt or even acknowledge a betrayal, because I think some people, right, can live in more of a denial kind of space, and then of course, there's no healing because it's not even being acknowledged yet.
Right. Yeah. And often that happens, Annie. I'm glad you brought that up in childhood, because the child doesn't necessarily know what to do with that betrayal because they're depending on the parent or caretaker for survival. And that could also happen in a couple relationship.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Both ends of it. Going back to like the couple relationship, I'm curious. So what if someone watching right now has had a betrayal in a romantic partnership? Maybe it's an infidelity. What if they choose to stay with that partner? What kinds of maybe healing do they need to be doing, or what do they need to be conscious of?
Yeah, that's a great question, because often individuals may be experiencing a lot of judgment and a lot of guilt when they're choosing to stay for whatever reasons. But I would always say, know that you have a choice, and being able to care for yourself during that time, getting the support through counseling, getting the support through coaching can be very integral, and creating these boundaries. So therefore, you have this healthy sense of parameters, and in your partnership, discussing with your partner your wants and your needs out of this relationship, and what's going to be helpful as you navigate moving forward and reestablishing trust and being able to repair the rupture that occurred. And so it may look like some negotiables and non-negotiables with your partner as you move forward in this healing process, and knowing that that work occurs individually, but it also occurs in that couple unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned trust, because obviously that's one of the things that comes up first when we think about betrayal. So, what does that even look like? How does someone restore that trust when it's been breached? What are some strategies that people can practice to, I guess, build up to that trust again?
Absolutely. And so, like the saying kind of goes, like it can take a lifetime to build trust and it can be ruined in a few seconds. And so, understanding one, what I always encourage is trust is a choice. And often the trust goes from that person not trusting themselves. I think that's one of the hardest things and roadblocks for them to actually work through, is because they no longer trust their own choices and their judgment. And so that's weighing heavily on them of, I should have known there was something that, where were the signs? And so they're putting a lot of that guilt internally, and it's stemming from this overall distrust in themselves, which has filtered into this mistrust and distrust of others. So I would recommend really working on the trust that you have within yourself and knowing what's in your control and what's outside of your control, being very vocal about your wants and your needs and identifying first and then implementing those boundaries that you have with your romantic partner, because that's key in continuing the relationship, because now you're able to identify, okay, I'm building and working on this trust. What are some things that will help me also begin to trust my partner? But going back to what I first stated was trust is a choice too. And so sometimes we can get into this dynamic of, I need all of these things done in order for me to begin to trust you. And I challenge individuals and couples to say, if they were to do all of these things, would that still increase your trust in them? Because at the end of the day, you have to say, okay, I'm willing to trust them based on these boundaries, based on these parameters. And getting into counseling and getting into coaching to understand those root issues that have allowed this to grow to where this betrayal or lack of trust. And usually that stems from a lack of communication, a lack of intimacy is key, because that breaks down the trust in a relationship.
Yeah, interesting. So would that be one of like core issues that could cause a betrayal of that sort? Might be, yes, the breakdown of intimacy.
Absolutely, because intimacy is communication. Like when you're not communicating, it's almost you're not going to be intimate. You don't feel that closeness. You don't feel that connection. It will often be forced, or it will be very short-lived. And so when couples find themselves in that dynamic of not being intimate, and that is intimacy on a spectrum. So that can go from flirting or kiss or hugs or all the way up, too. So it's being very mindful of that. That intimacy starts with communication.